The first words out of her mouth weren't even aimed directly at me, but they hit harder than any insult I'd heard in years. Another grumpy old guy with a clipboard, she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for the other cashier to hear. Probably wants a refund for something from 1998. They both snickered. I stood in line, silent, hands resting on the same worn leather notebook I've carried for over a decade. No name tag, no suit, just flannel, jeans, and boots stained from walking a dozen job sites. The young woman behind the counter, Lena, her badge said, never looked up when I approached. Her tone was clipped, dismissive. You here for a service ticket or what? I told her I was there to speak with the manager. She rolled her eyes. You'll need to wait. Mitch is busy with real business today. Funny thing is, I am the real business. What she didn't know was that I co-founded Roadsure nearly 30 years ago, built it from a two-man garage shop into a regional network of service centers across 5 states. I didn't need attention, never have, but I never forgot the reason we started this company, to treat every customer with dignity, whether they showed up in a $70,000 0-cents truck or a rusted-out Civic. That's why I still visit locations unannounced. No entourage, no warning, just me quietly watching how people are treated. And today, I wasn't just watching, I was the one being judged. Lena saw a nobody. What she didn't see was that I still held a majority stake in the company. And by the time she realized it, she'd be the one getting the lesson, not in business, but in basic human decency. Michael Trent never liked noise, especially the kind that came with success. While others chased spotlights and shareholder interviews, Michael preferred silence, structure, and the hum of machines. At 58, he lived alone in a modest farmhouse just outside of Fort Wayne, Indiana. No gates, no luxury car, just an old black pickup with a cracked rearview mirror and a heart full of blue-collar roots. What most people didn't know, what he never advertised, was that he wasn't just a founder of Roadsure, he was the founder. Back in the early 90s, Michael and his late college roommate Dan Whitaker scraped together a loan to open their first roadside repair shop. They didn't have fancy degrees or corporate funding, but they had grit, good instincts, and a simple goal: treat customers like neighbors and employees like family. That mindset took Roadsure from one dusty garage to over 160 locations across the Midwest. Today, Michael's net worth floated just under $40 million, 0 cents, tied up in stock, property, and royalties. But you'd never guess it. His clothes were worn, his coffee came from a diner off Route 6, and his happiest days were spent under a lifted hood. Since Dan passed away 5 years ago, Michael stepped back from day-to-day operations, handing off most of the corporate work to regional teams. But he still made unannounced visits to stores, taking notes on everything from service quality to customer interaction. No cameras, no CEO name tag, just a quiet man walking through the world he helped build, making sure it hadn't forgotten its foundation. Some employees assumed he was a retired mechanic or quality control guy. That was fine by him, because in Michael's eyes, the real test of character wasn't how someone treated the boss, it was how they treated the invisible people. And lately, something felt off. Some stores had become colder, quicker to judge, more interested in quotas than care. And Michael wasn't about to let that slide, not in a business built on trust. That's why he showed up to the Lakeside branch with his clipboard that day. And that's where it all began to unravel. From the moment Michael stepped into the Lakeside Roadsure branch, he felt it, an energy that was all wrong. The front desk buzzed with laughter, but not the warm customer service kind. It was the sound of young ambition layered with arrogance, and at the center of it was Yennecar. Early 20s, sleek ponytail, nails like glass, and the kind of smile that only appeared when someone wealthier or trendier walked through the door. As Michael waited patiently in line, clipboard in hand, she leaned to a fellow associate and whispered, "Another one of those grumpy clipboard guys, probably here to complain about tire pressure." They giggled. When Michael reached the counter, Lena barely acknowledged him. She glanced at his boots, then his notebook, and offered a cold, perfunctory name. Michael Trent. She tapped her keyboard without looking up. "And what's the issue? Something wrong with your brakes?" "No issue," he said calmly. "Just here to check in with your manager, Mitch. We have a meeting scheduled." "Mitch doesn't take walk-ins," she snapped, finally lifting her eyes and then narrowing them. "Especially not during fleet service hours. You'll have to wait." She waved him toward the faded plastic chairs by the vending machine, like she was doing him a favor. Michael gave a small nod and stepped aside. As he sat, he noticed a frail man, clearly a senior, approaching the counter. His name was Earl, based on the label on his service ticket. He politely asked for a status update on his vehicle, but Lena barely glanced at him. "I told you we'd call when it's ready," she said sharply. "You don't need to keep checking." Earl murmured something apologetic and shuffled away. Michael's jaw tightened. This wasn't just bad service. It was systemic disrespect. And it was personal. Minutes later, Mitch emerged from the garage bay, wiping grease from his hands. The moment he spotted Michael, his face lit up. "Mr. Trent? Sorry to keep you waiting. Didn't know you'd arrived already." Lena froze. Mitch strode over, offering a firm handshake. "Let's get you into the office." Michael smiled faintly. He looked back at Lena. Her face had drained of color. Whatever game she thought she was playing, she just realized she'd been playing it in front of the wrong man. And the lesson? It was just beginning. As Michael followed Mitch into the back office, the tension in the lobby hung like thick fog. Lena stood frozen behind the counter, eyes wide, lips parted, but no words came out. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was shock. Mitch, oblivious to the storm brewing just outside his door, chatted casually as they walked. "Didn't expect to see you out this way, Mr. Trent. You usually stick to the northern branches." Michael gave a small nod. Felt like taking a drive. Inside the office, the blinds were cracked just enough to see out into the lobby. Lena still hadn't moved. Mitch poured 2 coffees and handed one to Michael, then leaned on the desk with a grin. "So, what do you think of the Lakeside crew?" Michael took a slow sip before replying, "Not impressed." Mitch's smile faltered. Michael reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notepad. "One customer dismissed, one veteran belittled, one co-founder told to take a seat and wait." Mitch blinked. "Wait. She didn't know who you were?" Michael looked him dead in the eye. And that's the problem. Outside the office, the room had gone quieter. Word was already spreading. Staff who had once giggled with Lena now whispered behind her back, casting glances her way. Some looked curious, others looked relieved, like someone had finally called out what they'd silently endured. Michael didn't need to say much more. He wasn't just another old man with a clipboard. He was the man who built the company from dirt, sweat, and steel. And if Lena had judged him by his boots, she wasn't alone. But now, every step she'd taken that morning would be replayed in her mind with new eyes and a sinking feeling in her gut. The kind that comes when you realize you picked. Inside the office, Mitch set his coffee down and rubbed the back of his neck, clearly rattled. I'm sorry, Michael. Truly. That's not how we train our team. I'll handle it right away. But Michael held up a hand. This isn't about one rude comment, he said evenly. It's about what we're becoming. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low but firm. When we started Roadsure, we built it on respect and metrics. Mitch sat quietly, absorbing every word. He'd been with the company nearly 2 decades and had seen it shift, subtly, toward numbers over people. Michael flipped open his notepad and slid it across the desk. That's just what I saw in 1 hour. Imagine what's happening when no one's watching. Mitch studied the notes, observations on staff behavior, interactions with customers, body language, tone. It wasn't a gotcha list. Mitch swallowed hard. You think we've lost our way? Michael paused, then gave a quiet nod. I think we stopped asking ourselves who we serve, and I think it's time we start asking again. Outside the office, the world was still moving, but inside, a shift had begun. Not disciplinary, not punitive, but foundational. And Michael was going to see it through one store, one conversation, one mindset at a time. The following morning, Michael's phone rang just after sunrise. It was Stacy Morales, the regional director overseeing nearly 40 roadshow locations. Her voice was tight, apologetic, and laced with a mixture of embarrassment and urgency. Mr. Trent, she began, I've already reviewed the incident from yesterday. Mitch filled me in. Please know we take this seriously. This isn't who we are. Michael listened quietly. He didn't need promises. He needed proof the company still had a soul. But then Stacy said something that caught his attention. Lena asked to speak with you directly. Michael raised an eyebrow. She did? She did, Stacy confirmed. She's shaken and, well, humiliated, I think. She told Mitch she had no idea who you were, but more importantly, she realizes how she sounded. She's not asking to save faith. She's asking to understand. Michael let that sink in. In his decades in leadership, he'd seen 2 types of people. Those who defended their mistakes and those who wanted to learn from them. This could go either way. Set it up, he finally said, but not in a boardroom. I want her to meet me where it all started. You mean the Lakeside branch? No, Michael replied. I mean in the field, real work, real people. That's where the lesson sticks. Stacy hesitated, then chuckled softly. You really do things the old-fashioned way. Old-fashioned still works, he said, then hung up. He didn't want an apology scripted by H-Bar. He wanted reflection, growth, and, if possible, redemption. Because Roadsure wasn't just about repairs. It was about rebuilding trust. And Lena Carr was about to find out what that truly meant. Lena showed up 2 days later, wearing a stiff blazer and polished heels, clearly expecting a formal sit-down. Instead, she was greeted by Michael, already dressed in a work vest, steel-toe boots, and a clipboard in hand. No conference table, no PowerPoints, just the garage bay of an old Roadsure branch in rural Indiana, where the air smelled of motor oil and brake dust. Hope you didn't wear anything you mind getting dirty, Michael said, handing her a reflective vest and safety goggles. Her eyes darted around, confused. I thought we were going to talk. Michael shook his head. We are, but not here, not like this. He led her behind the shop, where a parts delivery had just arrived. Boxes of brake pads, hoses, and engine belts were stacked high. Start by inventorying those with me. Then we're riding out to the Plainville location. You're shadowing me for 2 weeks. Lena blinked. Shadowing? You want to understand the damage your attitude caused, he said evenly. You need to see what this job actually means to the people we serve. There was no hint of cruelty in his tone, only clarity. Lena hesitated, then slipped off her blazer and replaced it with the vest. For the first time in years, she wasn't in control of the room. She was the student, and Michael was the teacher, not of business strategy, but of human values. That day, she cleaned engine grease, double-checked parts invoices, and greeted customers without scripts. No corporate training had ever prepared her for this. And by the end of the shift, her feet ached, her pride was bruised, but something in her posture had shifted. The lesson had begun, and Michael was just getting started. The next 10 days became a crash course in humility for Lena. Michael took her to 3 different roadshow branches, each in small towns where customers weren't flashy, but loyal. Their first stop was in Plainville, where she met Curtis, a soft-spoken mechanic. Lena had never heard it put that way before. At her branch, speed and upselling were the main metrics, but here, everything moved slower, more intentional. Customers weren't numbers, they were neighbors. At the second location in Benson, Lena was assigned to assist front desk intake. It was there that she met Mrs. Adelman, a retired school teacher whose voice trembled as she explained that her check engine light scared her. Normally, Lena would have rushed through it, but after days beside Michael, something shifted. She sat with Mrs. Adelman, explained everything in plain terms, and even walked her to the lounge for tea. Later, Michael leaned over and said, "That's the first time you didn't treat someone like a task." But the real turning point came at the Brookville branch. They were just finishing up for the day when Earl Simmons, the same elderly veteran Lena had brushed off back at Lakeside, walked in. He didn't recognize her at first, but she remembered him instantly. This time, she greeted him with respect, pulled up his record, and even walked with him to check his car in the bay. "You're different than last time," Earl said with a faint. Lena didn't deny it. "I'm learning," she replied quietly. That night, riding back with Michael in his truck, Lena stared out the window, her hands stained with ink and grease. "Why do you do this?" she asked. "You could retire, vanish, live easy." Michael didn't answer right away. He simply said, "Because people forget what matters when they chase what sparkles. I stay to remind them." Lena didn't speak for the rest of the ride. Not because she had nothing to say, but because, for the first time in her career, she was listening. By the end of the second week, something in Lena's posture had softened. The sharp edges were still there, but dulled, replaced by something Michael hadn't seen in her before: reflection. They were sitting on the tailgate of his pickup behind the Brookville branch, eating lunch out of brown paper bags. No fancy deli orders, just egg salad and bottled water. Lena stared down at her hands, still stained from organizing old brake fluid inventory. Then, quietly, she spoke. "I used to think being the smartest person in the room was the goal," she said. "That if I didn't prove myself every second, I'd disappear. So I talk fast, judged fast, moved fast. I saw people as either obstacles or opportunities. No." Michael said nothing, just nodded, encouraging her to continue. "I thought wearing heels and quoting revenue projections made me important, but watching you work, it's different. You listen, you see people, you give them space to be who they are without trying to control the moment." She looked over at him, eyes wet but steady. "Back at Lakeside, I saw an old man with a clipboard. I didn't see your story, your value, even your humanity." Michael finally replied, voice low and measured, "You made a mistake. But the difference is, now you see it. That's how growth starts." Lena nodded, wiping the corner of her eye. I don't want to go back to who I was. Michael smiled faintly. Good, then don't. Because this journey wasn't about changing careers. It was about changing character. The final test came not through Michael's direction, but through Lena's own instinct. On their last day at the Elkhart branch, the lobby buzzed with end-of-month traffic when a frazzled teenage mother burst through the door, pushing a stroller with one hand and gripping a flat spare tire with the other. The front desk associate was already overwhelmed and brushed her off, muttering about waiting her turn. But before Michael could step in, Lena was already on her feet. She approached the young woman gently, took the tire from her, and said, "Let's get you taken care of." She didn't ask for permission. She didn't delegate it. She owned it. Lena coordinated with the techs in the bay, offered the mother a coffee, and even found crayons in the waiting area to keep the toddler occupied. She explained the repair process slowly, without condescension, and reassured the customer it would be done before school pickup. The woman nearly cried from gratitude. From across the room, Michael watched silently. No clipboard, no notepad, just a quiet nod of approval. It wasn't just customer service. It was leadership. After the rush died down, Lena returned to the counter, flushed but calm. "You saw that?" she asked. Michael nodded. "You didn't need my help," he said. "That's the point. Because real transformation isn't about performance under supervision. It's about doing the right thing when no one's watching." And in that moment, Lena passed the test she never knew she was taking. 3 weeks later, Lena stood beside Michael at the Roadshare Community Car Care Clinic, an event held in a church parking lot on the south side of Fort Wayne. Volunteers from several branches had come together to offer free inspections and minor repairs for veterans, low-income families, and seniors. But it wasn't the location or the turnout that caught Michael's eye. It was Lena. Gone were the heels, the tight blazer, and the carefully rehearsed smile. She wore jeans, a Roadshare sweatshirt, and a ponytail tied back with a rubber band. Grease smudged her cheek. Her hands were busy. Her heart, even more so. He watched as she knelt beside a nervous elderly man in a mobility scooter, calmly explaining how to check tire pressure using a gauge. Later, she spent 30 minutes adjusting the child car seat for a single mother who didn't trust her own install. Lena moved through the crowd with ease, no longer performing "you again," he teased. "Don't think I forgot that first day." She laughed. "Me neither. That's why I'm here." After the rush, as they packed up folding tables and boxes of brake fluid, Lena looked around at the crowd still milling about, smiling, sharing stories, connecting. She turned to Michael, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "Why wasn't this part of my training?" He gave a knowing smirk. "Because empathy doesn't come from manuals. It comes from moments." And this moment? It wasn't just another outreach event. It was the proof that Lena Carr wasn't just learning. She had become someone entirely new. 2 weeks after the clinic, Lena received an email marked confidentiality from the Roadshare Regional Office. It was from Stacy Morales and simply read, "Meet me Thursday, 9 a.m., downtown HQ. Bring nothing but your voice." When she arrived, she found herself seated across from Stacy, Michael, and 2 other executives. No performance reviews, no scripted feedback, just a quiet room. Lena didn't fumble. She spoke with conviction about listening before speaking, about how respect isn't shown in slogans, but in eye contact and tone, and how she once confused authority with attitude. When she finished, there was a pause. Then, "We'd like to offer you a new position," she said. "Client experience trainer. You'd work directly with incoming associates across the region. Not because you were perfect, but because you changed. Lena blinked. Me? You're sure? Michael spoke up then. I recommended you, not because of your mistake, but because of what you did afterward. You didn't just apologize. You listened, you grew, and now you can help others do the same. Lena's throat tightened as she opened the folder. Her name, her title, her new beginning. By the time she walked out of that building, the air felt different. It wasn't about a promotion. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about purpose. For the first time in her young career, Lena didn't feel like she was climbing a ladder. She felt like she was building something. One conversation, one apology, one human moment at a time. He watched her go with a quiet smile, knowing that the best kind of leadership is the kind that replaces pride with humility and leaves a legacy worth following. Michael sat alone in his truck outside the regional office, engine off, window cracked just enough to let in the spring breeze. He watched Lena disappear into the busy sidewalk crowd, no longer a rookie trying to prove herself, but a leader in the making. He let out a slow breath, the kind that comes after something heavy has been lifted not from the shoulders, but from the heart. This entire journey had started with a careless insult, a moment of arrogance, a young woman who didn't know what or who she was talking to, but what came from it was something deeper. Not revenge, not a firing, but growth, transformation, a reminder that people don't need to be perfect, they just need the chance to get better. Michael never wanted applause or plaques. He didn't need to be seen. But watching someone like Lena choose the harder road, the one paved with humility, service, and real connection, made every quiet mile worth it. Sometimes the loudest thing a man can do is stay silent long enough for someone else to hear themselves clearly. And when they finally do, that's when real change begins. Not in the garage, not in the office, but in the heart. This story reminds us that true value isn't worn, it's earned through how we treat others. Michael never raised his voice or pulled rank. He let character speak louder than power. And Lena, she proved that one mistake doesn't define you, what you do after it does. Growth doesn't come from titles or training manuals. It comes from humility, from listening, and from seeing people not for what they look like. In a world obsessed with appearances, this story is a powerful reminder that respect is the foundation of every lasting connection, whether you're running a company or helping someone change a flat tire. So if this story moved you, even just a little, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder about kindness, and hit subscribe for more real stories that matter, because we need more leaders like Michael and more second chances like Lena's